his idea of how it would all go down, what would happen, and how long it would take. It's coming soon. What's actually going to happen? His claim was the family would create a trigger, and like so many other triggers happening at the same time, it would be enough to push things past the tipping point. The chaos would come into play. There would be murders of white people by black people, and then there would be retaliation. There would be conflict within the white communities between racists and anti-racists, leading towards self-annihilation of the vast majority of the white communities, and the blacks would triumph. And then eventually the family would come to rule over all as a new world order. In fact, the claim was they would ride out the chaos in the bottomless pit, a secret city beneath Death Valley. Supposedly the trigger that would initiate the massive changes throughout America and beyond would be caused by the Manson family creating an album, a world-changing album. Stuff that they had all worked on, inspired by the Beatles and a lot of LSD. They believed that this would bring about the conflict to end all conflicts. The family prepared. They made ready for the conflict, worked on their vehicles to make sure they could escape. They gathered supplies, studied maps. They wanted to know exactly where to go to hide away from this coming conflict. They were told that Terry Melcher, a record producer, was going to come to the house to hear the material. And without this album even being considered, let alone produced, what were they expected to think of their chances for changing the world? And what would be a sufficient trigger to bring about this colossal change? On 23rd of March 1969, Manson, uninvited, entered the house that he knew as being Melcher's residence. Since Melcher had lived there, new people had moved in. Melcher was no longer a tenant, no longer connected. The new tenants were Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. When approaching the house, Manson was noticed by a photographer. The photographer was there to take a picture of Tate before her travel to Rome the next day. The photographer noticed Manson first of all through the window, approaching the main house. He went out onto the front porch to ask him what he wanted. Manson told him that he was looking for someone by a name the photographer did not recognise. So he recommended for him to try the back alley, which meant the path to the guest house. At the same moment, but still at the main house, Sharon Tate came to the front door and asked the photographer who was calling. Sharon Tate and the photographer observed Manson walk around to the guest house, come back a few minutes later, and leave the property completely. Later on that evening, Manson returned to the property again and went back to the guest house. He spoke with Rudy Altobelli, who was just coming out the shower. Although Manson asked for Melcher, Altobelli felt Manson had come for him. Speaking through the inner screen door, Altobelli told Manson that Melcher had moved to Malibu. He lied. He didn't know, he didn't have a clue where Melcher's new address actually was, and simply used it as a way of getting Manson out of his house. In response to further questions from Manson, Altobelli mentions that he himself has connections in the entertainment business. And of course Manson knows this to some degree due to his previous interaction with him at Dennis Wilson's home. At Wilson's, Altobelli had complimented Manson lukewarmly on some of his musical recordings that Wilson had been playing. When Altobelli informed Manson that he was going out of the country the next day, Manson said he'd like to speak to him upon his return. Altobelli lied, that he would be gone for more than a year. In response to a direct question from Altobelli, Manson explained that he had been directed to the guest house by the persons in the main house. Altobelli expressed the wish that Manson did not disturb his tenants. And so Manson left. Altobelli flew with Tate to Rome the next day. Tate asked whether that creepy-looking guy had gone back to the guest house the day before. On May the 18th, 1969, Terry Melcher visited the Span Ranch to hear Manson and the women sing. Melcher arranged a subsequent visit not long after, on which he brought a friend who possessed a mobile recording unit, but he himself did not record the group. By June, Manson was telling the family that they might have to show blacks how to start Helter Skelter. The family needed money. Manson encouraged Watson to obtain some money for their own support, to help the family prepare for the conflict. Watson defrauded a black drug dealer named Bernard Crow. Crow responded by threatening to wipe out everyone at the Span Ranch. Manson countered on the 1st of July 1969 by shooting Crow in his Hollywood apartment. Manson's mistaken belief was that he had killed Crow. Seemingly it was confirmed by a news report of a discovery of a member of the Black Panthers. Although Crow was not a member, Manson concluded that he must have been. Manson thought there would be a retaliation towards white groups, which would begin Helter Skelter. But of course this was not forthcoming, and was in fact an error on Manson's part. Manson turned the Span Ranch into a defensive camp, with night patrols and armed guards. Tex Watson would later write, Lackey was trying to get at the chosen ones, referring to the person that he had defrauded. On July 25th, Manson sent 3 family members to Gary Hinman to persuade him to turn over some money that Manson thought Hinman had inherited. After Hinman was held for 2 days as a hostage, Manson showed up. He showed up with a sword to slash his ear. After that, one of the family members, called Bobby Bersolio, stabbed Hinman to death, seemingly on the orders of Manson himself. Because of the Manson ideology, 2 of the members of the family, including Bobby, decided to use the blood of Hinman to draw on the wall a panther paw, which is a symbol of the Black Panthers, as a way of trying to make it seem like it was racially motivated in gang violence. They also wrote "Political Piggy" in blood on the wall too, to try and create this trigger in order to create an apocalyptic war between different ethnic groups. Decades later, after Bobby was in prison, he would say that they had gone to Hinman's to recover money paid to Hinman for drugs, and those drugs had supposedly been bad. So they went there to go and collect the money because they were sold some bad drugs. However, Susan Atkins, one of the other family members who went along to the house and was involved, told a very different story from Bobby. She claimed that they were told directly to go to Hinman's house and get the supposed inheritance. She also said in her 1977 autobiography that Manson privately told her 2 days before they went to the house that if she wanted to do something important, she could kill Hinman and get his money. Bobby was arrested on the 6th of August 1969. He was caught driving Hinman's car, and the police found the murder weapon in the tyre well. And it was only 2 days later that Manson told the family members at Span Ranch, "Now is the time for Helter Skelter." On the night of the 8th of August, Manson directed Watson to take Atkins, Linda Kasabian and Patricia Krenwinkel to the house where Melcher used to live. And the order was simple: totally destroy everyone in it, as gruesomely as you can. Manson told the women to do as Watson would instruct them to do. The current occupants of the house at 10050 Silo Drive, all of whom were strangers to Manson's followers. There was Sharon Tate, the wife of the famed director Roman Polanski, and she was 8.5 months pregnant, a friend and former lover, Jay Sebring, as well as one of Polanski's friends, an aspiring screenwriter called Frykowski, and his lover, Abigail Folger. Roman Polanski himself was away in London, working on a film project. Tate had been visiting him and had returned to the United States only 3 weeks earlier. After midnight on the 9th of August 1969, the murder team arrived at the house on Silo Drive.